All right, everybody. I am so excited, Steve, to have you back on the show. In case you missed our first podcast with Steve O'Leary from Apex, Steve is back on and just going to give us just some more of his knowledge on doing startups and build outs and just the whole package. So Steve, I know you've been on the show before, and again, thanks again for being on again, but can you, for anybody that maybe didn't catch our last episode, give us a little background on yourself and Apex? And I have got a bunch of questions for you when you finish up.
Fantastic. Well, I'll say I'm glad I made the cut. Glad I'm back. Right? So, Apex is a family-owned, fully integrated design, architecture, and construction firm. Kind of breaking down, we're a four-generation firm. So first two generations were architects, third generation GCs. Good compliment there.
Yes.
And the fourth generation of these generations, the fourth generation brought in design, right? And this is where we've created the design build team with integrated architecture, design, and we are the GC in-house. Everybody's under the same roof. So we've always focused. We want to be specialists within our specialty. So we've decided to only do healthcare. That's all we do. We work with private physicians around the country. So, building state-of-the-art facilities nationwide. So we went nationwide about 4 years ago, made that shift.
Love it.
Yeah. Our process was, it was now proven and tried and true. It took, a couple years here to really file it in and dial it in here locally around the States. And now we're able to take it anywhere we go. We want to, what we say, we want to deliver exceptional ROI, a peace of mind at really every phase of the design build journey. And it really is a journey. Let me tell you, it's not a project. Yep. So it's a big feat. So, we, like anything, we want to make sure we're experts in mitigating risk, eliminating surprises, which there always will be, saving time, money, and effort for our clients.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and having had clients that have worked with you, I mean, you guys do a great job, and really do help bring their dreams to fruition, and keep it on task. So thank you guys for doing that.
Yeah.
So, all right, I've been thinking a little bit here about some questions for you, and I think right now, 2022, and where we're at right now, I'm just going to say it. Construction sucks.
And I can agree with you. I'll concur. Absolutely.
From the cost to where things are at right now, to timelines and all of that. And so I want you to just kind of tell me, what do you think are, what do you see as some of those biggest missed opportunities that we have right now as we're going through, this process? Can you talk a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, I can dissect it a bit here. And why is a GC saying, why does construction suck? Well, it really does. I mean, we could talk for quite a bit of time, but I want to really just get down to really just focus on the meat. I think really, honestly, there's kind of three components I like to kind of stick to. First is going to be focusing on pre-planning and detailing the intent, right?
Yes.
Very, very integral. We really need to make sure that one of the biggest pitfalls we see doctors slipping into is not allowing sufficient planning time in the beginning of the project. Creating a lot of pressure for everybody involved, and racing to the finish line, for that critical deadline. We need to see patients, right? And that completion date. And we are respectful of that, right? But you got to make sure you're setting up your team, because you're only as good as your weakest link. And in construction, there are a lot of links
And I say that all the time. I so agree with you on that. That is so true.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but
You're fine.
amen to that.
I think anybody who's listening as business owners and entrepreneurs will get that. And projects always take longer than anticipated to work through the planning and budgeting, to obtain the necessary approvals on permitting, right? What's the town? What are they? The city? What are their requirements, right? And then following through to the construction phase. It always takes longer than you think, right? So our advice is always to start the real conversations, right? I think on my last episode, I talked about, and what advice I would give people is, call them when you don't need them rather than when you do, right? And doctors call me like, hey, Steve, it might be too early, but I'm about 3-4 years out, or 2 years out. My lease is coming up and I want to buy a piece of land or a building. I know it might be too early. And I said, no, doc, this is perfect.
Absolutely.
Let's have a candid conversation. Let's build some trust. Let's understand where you're going. I'll give you suggestions. I'll give you some advice. And, we might pick up the phone, in 2 months or 3 months, or maybe even a year. Right. And maybe we'll get things going. So, as always, to start the conversations early with your team, 24 months in advance of a desired completion date, at minimum 24 months. All right.
And I think I just want to say, just jumping in here for a second, I think that's such good advice. And I know that you're a giver of time. And I just know you and know that that's your personality. But, I think, I tell this the same thing when I'm working with docs too. Like, it is better to call and ask and get your questions answered and get set up and be proactive than to be reactive once you're in a situation and now you've bought land or you've, done this or that. And now you're just racing. So I think that's such good information that you're given there.
Yeah. I mean, if I can pace it rather than race it, that's what I do in life. Right.
Absolutely. I like that. I like that.
Pace it, not race it. So, another thing is focusing on a collaborative problem solving. We like to say here at Apex, we're glorified problem solvers. That's what we do every day, right? There's a heck of a lot of problems, from design, pre-planning, obtaining and retaining, products, to, making sure trades are on site. I mean, there's so much, right? Problem solving that needs to happen. And most projects are all set up for parties to mitigate their own risk, right? In some circumstance, right? So everybody can blame others for those problems that arise, right? There's never on their face, right? So again, collaborative projects. When I say collaborative projects, in my prior episode, we talked about that traditional model versus design build, right?
Yep.
The collaborative approach is the design build, right? You can still have an architect who will collaborate with GCs and make sure you have a good team, but following a true design build approach, you'll have a far greater success rate, right? And because accountability is placed on one firm rather than several different groups of people, and you're the individual herding cats, right? Or what I like to call it the messy middle, right?
Yeah.
What we do, I mean, there's 3 disciplines. You got your architect, your designer, and your GC, right? You are the individual, you're the doctor, you are the one who is caught in the middle. And in some ways you're right there with them, right, Jill, as the consultant.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
You've done it. You can give, your testimonial, you can give your expertise around it. But at the end of the day, I would never want to be put in that position that I'm trying to make knee-jerk reaction decisions on a Friday, which is a $50,000 application, or a month additional time, right? So, that's where you work with a squad, or you work with a team that is collaborative on the problem solving, and they're coming to you with actual solutions rather than the problem itself, right?
Yeah.
So there's that as well.
Yeah, that's great. So I get asked this all the time. People, I've got docs that are coming to me and saying, Jill, I have a vision of owning my own thing. And, I don't want to lease, but, you know, what, tell me a little bit about some of the misconceptions, you know, because they're always asking me, should I buy land? Should I buy a building? You know, what is this better than another? Can you talk to that a little bit? Because I think we've got a lot of people out there that are saying, you know, I think I want to do something, but I've heard from one friend that doing it this way is better. Then I've heard from, you know, my Facebook group that doing it this way is better. So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I'll, you know, this is just my view, right? And I'm not saying those people are wrong, right? Colleagues or friends or, you know, the social media influencers, which we'll get into. We always get a laugh at that. But you know, some of the misconceptions, really oftentimes this happens a lot, right? More than not always. Probably 0% chance it doesn't. But a client, you know, their initial thought process of, you know, purchasing a building or purchasing land and then having ambitious plans, right? Is it does not always include the knowledge of the existing conditions of the building or land, right? How does that sit? What does it look like? I mean, misconceptions of, oh, you just got to start, you know, let's get our backhoe in. And I got an excavator's next door neighbor and he can dig our hole for us. And, you know, we'll put our foundations in and he's got time. Can we get going? Right. Everybody says they got time, right?
Right.
So it's really important to make sure that where I'm going with this is having a team that is going to run the feasibility studies under the conditions and know the conditions that your ambitions plans can actually be achieved. Ambitious plans can be achieved. So, you know, finding a team that's going to do a lot of the civil engineering, the soil testing, the geo testing, right? Which will then describe what is actually, how much work is going to need to be done, right? We actually had a recent story of a doctor for 12 months. They owned a piece of land. They called us. They were talking to developers. They were talking to a couple architects, their buddies, and their biggest thing was trying to get a 15,000 square foot building positioned on the site, right? Well, nothing was done around, you know, egress points and where things are going. You're right. And 12 months trying to figure this out. And we came in and said, well, guys, let's step back a bit, right? You know, what are your ambitions? What do you want to do? Why 15,000 square feet? We actually said, guys, we went to the city and they said, well, due to parking requirements, water retention, not going to bore you with this terminology, but when it rains, where does that water?
Exactly. This is the important stuff we have to think about with land.
Where does that water go? Well, we'll put a pond over there, right? Well, we got a plan for a 100-year storm. That's what the city's asking us, right?
Right.
1 in 100 years, we're going to see this storm, right? We got a plan for it. Now where does that water go? You know, and it ended up being, I'll make a very long story short. It ended up being that we actually needed to spend an extra, it was close to $500,000 in just earthwork, water retention, parking needed to be done on top of what their ambitious plans were to be done, right? And what they wanted. So big number. But, you know, again, you know, having those people come in, right? And not thinking that everything looks the same. Well, my buddies did it this way, you know, inexperienced and misled directions from friends and colleagues, right? There's not one project ever the same, ever. Yeah. There's not one, you know, every Wendy's looks the same. They have their own model. You know, these chains have, Starbucks look the same usually, right? The position of the building, they all cost different, right? There's different pricing for each one of those projects. So, you know, don't always think it's all the same. So really having a well thought out plan for the projects, you know, will lead to more effort and time spent. So
that's great. And I just want you to unpack something for me here for a minute, because I really don't think sometimes my docs understand the difference of, and I'm just going to have you hit some of the points here. When we're looking at land, and you've been talking and throwing out some different words, surveys, different things like that. But, you know, when we're looking at land, we really need to, can you just kind of hit some of those top things that we're looking at before you're purchasing the land that you want to be paying attention to? And then flip side of it, let's say we're going into a building, like what are some of those things that we want to be looking at on a building? Like I know from roof to
Yeah.
HVAC to structure. Can you just unpack that just a little bit? Because I think these are like the little golden nuggets that I want my docs to hear, because it's one thing to just like, oh, there's a great piece of land, I'm going to buy it. Oh, there's a great building, I'm going to buy it. But it's a bummer to be in that $500,000 later. I didn't plan that for my budget because I didn't realize that that was a part of what I needed to be thinking about. Do you mind unpacking that just a little bit for me?
Sure, absolutely. Um, we call it feasibility, right? Or engagements, feasibility engagements. You can do this with any of your, the team that are a part of. Let me dissect what a feasibility engagement, who's involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
A feasibility engagement, the individuals who are involved that you're going to need and assess a piece of land during a due diligence period when you buy something, right? It's usually 90, I recommended 90 days, right? Some shorter because of the market, they want shorter times. We'd recommend nothing less than 90 days, 3 months. Give yourself time to walk away from the deal if needed, right? But get as much information as you can and ahead of the process. If this is something you really want to do at the end of 90 days, we presumably want to go straight into permit, right? Mm-hmm. So we're using that due diligence period during the pre-planning phase, right? So speed. I talked about speed earlier in the last video. Yep. That's how we like to position speed. So a part of that is going to be all professional services. What I mean by that, we have engineers, architects. Those are professional services. Civil, doing all of the groundwork, and then we have structural as well, narratives, type of building, things like that, hip roof versus flat roof. So those are really identifiers, right? That they start kind of drawing up the playbook, and then alongside them is going to be the design team or designers who could be one and the same of the architect. You're starting to pick exterior finishes and, brick versus stone versus siding and all different, aesthetics related items, right? And also keeping in mind what the city is wanting from you as well. Certain cities want a certain percentage of stone, right? You got to know that now versus later, right? What's the cost difference of that? So, and then the GC, having a general contractor, like I said, participate during that process on a progressive budgeting exercise, meaning as it's being designed and the playbook is being created, we're starting to execute on a soft bid process, right? Of getting out to trades, getting input, getting costing to know, what it's going to cost. All of this is happening within 90 days. It's a lot, right? So you as a doctor, it would be really tough to go out, as I said before, the messy middle, you to try to navigate that yourself, try to go to I know some city guys. I'll make some phone calls and emails.
I know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody.
Right? I know a guy. Yeah. So, it's always that it's absolutely powerful. I will say there's value in that, right? Use that, position that, but with the right individuals who are representing you, right? Yeah. Who do it every day, who understand it. It will pay you dividends down the road rather than you try to do it yourself. So, but that's, dissecting it to a little more detail.
And how about if we were doing a building, somebody's looking at something existing, what are we looking at to say this is a go or a no go? Can you unpack that just a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I go to more of these than even looking at land, and these are very, very important because the information that I call it real estate advisement. I'm not a broker. We're not a brokerage house. We're not, negotiating the deals. We're providing information to the real estate broker. And what that information does is it arms them with how to go back to the ownership of that building and say, hey, your building's great or it's crap, right? And here's what will need to be ultimately replaced. So what we do is we take an approach. We'll come in, I'll walk the building. I'll look at some major points. We'll look at structure, right? I'll look at foundation. I'll look at how the structure is, what the structure, how it's built, steel versus wood, support columns, distance between support columns, right? We got to know that because, size of operatory, flow, efficiency,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
It's one thing to say, oh, we could just demo all this. Well, there could be columns, which we've done before. There's, we hope columns are straight down in a straight line, but no, Frank put them in and he might have, having a bad day and says, let's put one here, right? No offense to Frank, if you're listening. It's making sure the structure is going to be, usable for your practice, right? And the efficiency of the practice. And then that also the bigger thing we look at is all the utilities or the building utilities, right? HVAC. So, taking a picture of, and this will happen during an inspection report if you're buying something, right? But getting a general contractor and an architect to look at this as well is very important. The age of the unit, the size of the unit, right? Making sure it's zoned if there are zones. Then also looking at, there's such things as, I'm going to throw some terms, RTU, which is rooftop unit, meaning the HVAC's on the roof versus is it on the, is it in the space? Now you're taking away valuable space. Would it be beneficial to throw it on the roof if you're replacing it anyways? What's that cost? We're going to look at roof. We're going to look at water damage. We're going to look at all of the window seals, right? I mean, we're going to get some nitty gritty stuff. Also getting into electric, is the electric size appropriately?
So important.
Is the water sized appropriately? These are all things like you'd be amazed. A gentleman bought a building during our process, right? He had us come in, we took a look at it. We actually called the city. It was a wood structure building. He was changing use of that building. It did not have a fire sprinkler system.
I was just going to say that's huge. Yes. Sprinklers are huge.
And it was an additional $60,000 to bring a upgraded water service from the street to the building, right? You would have thought, oh, we got a 3/4 inch water service, we're fine. No, you need a fire sprinkler system. I mean, the whole total of the sprinkler system was over 6 figures, right? So these are all things that need to be considered, right? Yeah, it's got water to it, but is it big enough, right? We always say it needs to be, 1.5 inch line big enough to support so many operatories, or, what we call fixture counts, sinks, toilets, drains, blah, blah, blah. So these are all things that we want to look at. And what this does, it starts forming a scope of work before you start building your practice, right?
Right.
And these are really big numbers that could, in some cases, be bigger than actually the build out, right? There's been circumstances where a build out might be $500,000 for the build out, but the building improvement work, because it needed new roofs, needed new windows, it needed a fire sprinkler system, it needed all the things, right? The only things that were left were 4 walls. That was going to be over $650,000, right? But it truly is, though, looking at it, it's an investment, right? You talk about ownership and the aspirations. Gosh, I would say more than 75% of the calls we get are going to be owner occupied, meaning doctors want to buy land or buy a building, and they're done paying, the lease, and they look at the longevity of the life cycle of the lease and say, what am I doing? I'm throwing this money away. How can I deploy that money as an investment? Right.
Yeah. And I say that all the time, looking at that and saying, if you can invest in a property and invest in your business, you're just building your portfolio. So when you are ready to make decisions at a different point in your life, you may be selling that practice, but keeping that business as an investment, or vice versa. There's just so many ways. So that was great. Thanks for breaking that down, because I get a lot of calls just like you do. And I feel like sometimes it's such a great deal. I gotta go. And they're telling me I need to hurry up and sign something. And, and I'm like, whoa. Let's get our right team in place to make sure we're keeping you safe, so that you're making good decisions. You're going in eyes wide open. You have an understanding of potential scope of work, cost of work, and you aren't making relate, like those gut decisions that are, we're reacting, I just want it, versus it may not be the best decision for you. So thanks for, breaking that, down a little bit. Now, I know you said something about social influencers. I didn't catch what you had said about that, but what were you saying about? Do they have something to do with our construction?
Yeah, right. What the kids are calling these days, what are the handles or something, right? I mean, Instagram and however you want to word it, right?
Right.
As social media influencers, right? And it plays a big role in really misleading a client, right? And we call it the HGTV effect, right? Well, I saw it on HGTV, right? It's not cringeworthy, and some of it's great. Don't get me wrong. I watch HGTV, right? I love it, but it only gives you a snapshot of a dramatic makeover of a building, right? Or anything. Yes. And little is shown on the pre-planning efforts, to mitigate that fear of the unknown or cost overruns or time delays, right? And that's what we call social media influencers, or the HGTV effect. And that's it's a misconception,
sure.
Right? It's not all that easy, right?
Right. And I think like you breaking it down and saying, look at all the things we just broke down that you have to pay attention to with land or a building. I would assume that, what you're going with is, it makes it look like it just happens like that. And, I buy the land, I have my building, I'm a successful business owner, and it doesn't quite happen that way.
I haven't had a client say they want to, roll a double wide onto the site and they just want to hook it up. Not yet. So when that happens, we can do it if they need it, but
it'll be a different industry, industry for sure.
Different. Yeah.
So, I get this all the time. I'm sure you do too, but what do you think it is that really makes some of these projects so stressful or challenging for some of our docs out there?
Yeah, I'll start with this. It's a large undertaking for a doctor specifically, perhaps in their first time. And maybe you've never taken on a construction project before, and it's out of your comfort zone, right? And even if you've gone through construction projects before, they've, really gotten you got a lot on your plate, and now you got to take on this additional endeavor. That's going to require a lot of time and a lot of attention, right? And also there's the fear of the unknown in construction as well, right? There can be some unknowns, but I think a lot of that through good process, good teamwork, good individuals that you deploy in your best interest, you'll negate that, right? And there's a lot of money at stake, and it's a costly investment. It's really about a long-term approach, right? And I think that's what makes it so stressful, is just the undertaking of who do I need to bring on, right? And it's challenging, and who do I trust, right? Who do I trust? And that's where, we always say, rely on your trusted advisors you have in your corner today, whether that's a consultant like you, Jill, a financial advisor, a banker, influencers around you, colleagues. That's some of our best referrals come from other clients or colleagues, right? And I think that's very, very important. Follow reputation, right? Just as you would in your own practice. And the people you're referring, whether it be a specialist, you want to go to a reputable person that you feel comfortable, right? I mean, follow that gut, follow that intuition. It's gotten you this far in business, right? If you're an entrepreneur listening and you're a physician, you're a doctor, taking on or wanting to take on this endeavor, follow that gut. It's proven you right to this point. So, it's a lot, and it's a lot of time. And there's a lot. Once our clients start to engage and have conversation with our team specifically, they start seeing that, right? They start seeing, okay, it's okay. They got a process, and whether that's us that's somebody else that is in your corner, another design build firm, or, their architect, who's delivering that design build methodology. I think it's really smart to really understand these guys can do it. So again, it's just, they're going to be stressful. They're
Yeah.
going to be challenging. And I will tell you, we'll be the first to tell you, there's going to be some stress points through this process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I would love to say I have a bulletproof process, right? I have a pretty darn close one, right? But scrap metal can get, it can go in different directions, right?
Yeah.
And you've got to make sure we can pivot. And that's what, finding a team who can pivot for you and understand, understand your needs, understand that timeline, and that start and stop date is really, really important. So
yeah, that's great. And I say the same thing too. If we've got a plan, we're going to follow that plan to the best of our ability. But every once in a while, things are going to come at us. And I love, I know the pivot has been the word, of the last couple of years, but that is sometimes what we have to do. We have to just kind of adjust our way of thinking, adjust our scope a little bit, make sure we stay on track and keep moving forward. And I agree, having the right team in place makes all the difference in stalling out or continuing to move forward if we have those little obstacles come up. So any other insights you want to share about making construction not suck as we're, kind of finishing up here?
Yeah, I would say, hey, listen, I'm a DIYer myself, but avoid the DIY approach for this scale of a project, right? If this is what you're looking to do, especially if your business is on the line, right? You're a busy professional. You've got a practice to run. You got a patients to care for, and attempting to take on this larger project yourself and acting as a general contractor is only going to overly involve your time and take away from that practice. And it will add tremendous amounts of stress to your life. And instead rely on the professionals, following a proven process, delivering projects effectively. It will certainly make construction, the experience, way more pleasant as well. So.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, again, Steve, you have just given us a wealth of little nuggets of good information. And I know that my docs once again are saying, "Whoa, I'm so glad Jill had Steve, back on the show." As we finish up, any last thoughts, any last little pearls that, takeaways that you think somebody needs to know as we're finishing up here?
I would say follow the intuition, follow your intuition, follow your gut. I know that's a very a term that gets thrown around, right?
Sure.
Follow that intuition, and you know what that means. It's one of those. It means something different for everybody, right? And if your guard is up, or you think maybe this is, when you get into it and you start getting to a point where you're starting to qualify design builders or an architect or a GC, and they're really just selling it to you rather than listening, right?
Yes.
Follow that gut, follow that intuition, step back, be steady, right? And find that group of individuals who are just going to be in your corner all the way through.
I think that's great. It's slowing down, taking your time, reaching out early, being proactive. Reset, proactive versus reactive as you're getting ready to go through this process. So I know we said it before on the last show, but if somebody wants to get a hold of you or Apex, they're just like, okay, once again, I think I just want to have some questions answered. How can they best get a hold of you?
I think the simplest way, instead of throwing my email or phone number out here personally, just reach out to us on the website. Right, on the first page there, inquiry, throw your name, numbers, just give me a brief description. Myself or Bruce Johnstone will reach out to you and hear you out, right, and understand and give you some pointers if needed. Our website is apexdesignbuild.net. So
Perfect. Great.
right.
Thank you. And of course, if anybody wants to follow you guys, you're out on Facebook, you're out on social.
Our handles.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. I know you're on LinkedIn. So, well, again, this has been an absolute pleasure. You've done a great job just giving us some good information. And as you know from the last time, I love to finish up with a little speed round. So, are you ready once again to go through a speed round with me?
Absolutely. Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. How about this one? Describe your style in one word.
Inquisitive.
Oh, that's a new one. I haven't heard that. Interesting. Okay. Anything you're listening to or watching right now?
If I told you what I listened to, you'd really understand my personality. Let's go watching National Park Wonders, I think it's called.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
great. Great. All righty. And if there was one thing you do just for you, what's that?
Oh, yeah. But I never really liked quiet time, before having kids. Now I love it. I would definitely say spending quiet time and visualizing is something I do. I visualize my 1 and 3 year goals.
Oh,
So,
that's
yeah.
great. That's wonderful. All right. How about a hidden talent?
Oh, depends on who you ask, but you're asking me. I would say I can restore or fix really just about anything. So I have a very restorative trait. So
Oh,
I do enjoy that. Yeah.
That's cool. I bet you got a fun garage then.
I do. Yeah. I need a bigger one. So, yeah.
And then finally, as we finish up, do you have any big, hairy, audacious goals?
All
I
right.
know. What a question.
This is a good one. First thing that literally comes to mind, because I'm thinking business. I've always wanted to create a grilled cheese like pop up like van or on a lake, preferably,
Oh, cool.
right?
Yes.
On a pontoon, right? So that's kind of my buddies and I have thrown that around. It's something crazy, right? Because you got to think passion. I love grilled cheeses. That's one
Yep.
of my wife's things. She loves me. I make her. And then you think, income and how is it going to change or how's it going to be the best? So that's something we throw around. But yeah.
Well, when you do it, I want to know what lake and where, because I love grilled cheese, and and I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what you can do with it.
That's what's fun, right? Throw some ingredients at me. Let's throw it in and see what it tastes like.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, again, Steve, thanks so much for being on the show. This was just a pleasure again. Thanks for coming back. And until next time.
Thank you.
All
Have
right.
a good one. See you, everybody.
Thank you. All right, everybody. I am so excited, Steve, to have you back on the show.